Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Connections webinar, Financial Wellbeing, the Basics. Let everyone join here for a minute, get started. Good, welcome everyone. Happy to have you here. Spring Our Connection series. Give a couple more seconds here for our group to assemble. Great. We will plan on getting started and we'll continue to welcome people here in the next couple of minutes as we do that. I'd like to welcome you all to the Spring Our Connections webinar series. I'm Amy Gerretsen, dialing in this morning from Smith Hall on campus. And I'm excited to be joined by Mandi Gausewitz and Dan Hager. We're going to talk to us specifically today about financial well-being and how that comes out of the pandemic. As we're getting started here, if you'd like to use the chat to share your name and your class year where you're joining us from, that would be wonderful. It's great to connect socially in the chat feature. If you have specific questions throughout the webinar for Dan or Mandi, please do that in the Q&A function as well. So we'll manage those. And today we're really going to have a conversation about how we can thrive through the pandemic. You know, moving forward, we've been in this a year with really that focus on the financial well-being of being well and how we kind of get started, especially those basic kind of pieces. So I'm excited to start the spring series in this way and welcome Mandi and Dan to join us. Mandi is a 2003 graduate of Ripon College. She had a major in economics and a minor in French, and then spent some time after being a swimmer on campus and being involved in a lot of activities working in France for a year, which is pretty great post-college experience. Returned to Wisconsin after a year and got started as an assistant at a financial firm, and now is the COO of that same financial firm. So great career path there and kind of some great expertise to share with our folks today. You'll see Bree says hi in the chat, Mandi. And Mandi lives in Madison with her husband, Rich, and we're happy to have you, Mandi, and excited to chat with you today as well. And Dan, welcome, class of 2006. Dan studied business administration and leadership studies. He did start a very interesting group formerly called SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise, which is now the Creative Enterprise Center. So it's sort of morphed over time, but does still exist on campus where students are consulting and working with the community at large and the businesses in the community, which is wonderful. He and his wife met at Ripon. They have 2 children. They live in Minnesota, where Dan is at Northwestern Mutual. Correct? Right.
Yep.
Using all these abbreviations. So what I thought we'd do, again, you can use the Q&A to ask specific questions that you might have, but we're just have a dialogue. I have a few specific questions for Dan and Mandi, and they can kind of talk between themselves about how they feel about some of these things and what they kind of recommend or suggest. And then we'll kind of see where your questions are. So let's kind of jump right in. We talked a little bit about this kind of shared philosophy. There's an overarching kind of sense of shared philosophy with all financial planners and people thinking about financial well-being. So what should people really focus on? What are kind of those shared philosophies that anyone could start with? Mandi, do you want to get us started?
Sure. So I guess the first one that comes to mind for me when it comes to savings is start early, the sooner the better. I found a fun couple slides here for Amy to share. This first one essentially, well, it'll cover 2 concepts, but really it speaks to the benefit of starting to save early and investing those funds. So we've got a couple of different examples here of scenarios that people might find themselves in. First of all, we can take a look at Consistent Chloe. She is one of those people that started saving early at age 25, saving some funds and then investing them, just getting a real modest return of 5.75%, just saving $200 a month. At age 65, she's the blue line there, she ends up with almost $370,000 saved just from doing $200 a month. So Chloe, I would recommend definitely trying to model yourself after her if you can. Some people find themselves in different areas. For example, Quincy got started early, but then he quit saving, hence the name Quitter Quincy. He went from 25 to 35. He was saving the $200 a month. He did invest it. It was good to start early. Maybe he had, some life events come up where he couldn't save for a while. But regardless, even with the 24,000 that he had saved, he made it to almost 177,000 at retirement age for him. The next one I'll point out is Nervous Noah. He started saving, but he decided he wasn't very comfortable with the stock market overall. He thought he'd just kind of squirrel it away at the bank. So this one speaks a little bit more to say investing in different areas, whether it be like the Dow, the S&P 500, instead of letting it all sit at the bank, trying to keep ahead of inflation for yourself and earn a little more over the long term. So Noah still did also have a nice amount saved at the end, but had he been more like Chloe, he would have ended up with quite a bit more. Then we've got late Layla, who got started a little bit later in life saving, but still, investing those funds overall over 30 years. She did end up with a decent sum, 192,000. So yeah, I guess overall, the main thing here is start early, make it easier on yourself.
Right, and really not just save money, but save it in an investment manner. So invest your money, not just save your money, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. This is sort of a similar viewpoint then, based on income and savings and.
Yeah, so this talks about, there's a concept called compounding interest. So as you save, saving a little bit each month, the funds that you've saved also grow. So this talks about essentially the percentage of your income that you would need to save toward retirement starting at different ages. So we can just look at like a $50,000 household income. If you're starting at age 25, you might want to try to save around 8% of your income per year, okay, in order to hit a retirement goal. If you're starting later in life, maybe around 40, the amount that you're going to want to save is going to increase pretty significantly as a percentage of your income. So it also helps starting earlier in the sense that you're not all of a sudden finding yourself needing to save a larger chunk later that eats into other budget line items.
Yep, and this just shows the second page just includes some higher household incomes. We will make all these available for the participants after the webinar too, so you can review those in a little more detail as well. Dan, do you have anything specific to add regarding savings, or do you want to talk a little bit about how you manage debt?
Well, yeah, just a couple quick things to add on the savings piece, and then I'll transition over to the debt side. But the key is to develop a philosophy right out of the gate and a plan, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. A plan is better than no plan. And having a philosophy to follow will allow you, almost like a GPS, will take you through life as efficiently as possible. So on that front, I really truly believe in what I call 20-60-20 model. And Mandi, correct me if you think differently on this, but I'm a firm believer that if you can live and pay your bills off of 60% of your income, save 20% of your income, not all necessarily for retirement, by the way, because again, if we're graduating college in our 20s, we still have big expenses in our 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah.
But that 20% is split up between all of life stages. And then the other 20% of your income, you just get to go spend on whatever the heck makes sense. And the nice thing about a philosophy like that is whether you start out making 40, 50 grand out of college and all of a sudden in your 40s and 50s, you're making 200 grand, you can follow that philosophy all the way through.
It's going to serve you a long time, and it's not hard. It's not challenging or difficult to understand, kind of that model.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you think with students carrying, especially a lot of loan debt? How do you decide what you pay down if you have a car and you know have
Yeah.
college debt and other kind of living expenses? How do you decide what to do and what makes the most sense for especially young people as you're getting started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because debt is a very emotional conversation with our clients. And oftentimes emotion gets in the way of logic. So when we have debt conversations with our clients, one of the very first things we consider is good debt versus bad debt. So for example, good debt would be a mortgage in today's world. And, throughout the last year of 2020, we saw mortgage interest rates go down to historic lows. Owning a home on a 30-year mortgage at 3% is wildly efficient. Because Mandy, you showed that example with JP Morgan earning modestly 5.75 on your investments, meaning the amount that you could pay above and beyond on your mortgage to save 3% of interest versus earning almost 6%. Long term, you're going to be far better off earning 6% as compared to saving 3. Now, on the flip side of that coin, though, there are debts, i.e. credit cards for the most part, or other consumer debts, where now all of a sudden our interest rates are in the teens or even low 20s. And in that case, it's obviously far better to develop a strategy to pay down those debts as quickly as possible. The gray area, and where a lot of financial planners may differ in their approach, is kind of that middle ground. Student loan debt, for example, depending on whether it's federal or private, can have different interest rates. Usually I see them between 4 to 6%, give or take. And there may be loan forgiveness programs available to you, which might mean not overfunding it. So you really just have to work with somebody who's qualified to give you good advice on those gray area debts and whether you overpay those or just let them go to full term. So I'm not sure if that's exactly clear. Whenever we get in the gray area, it's about as clear as mud, but it's good to have somebody in your corner who can give you the advice.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, right? It's a big thing to think about, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've just spent all this money, but now I've got to go out and try to make some money. But I also have to think about saving money. And so you really do have to evaluate every piece of income and debt you have, and then what those rates are on interest and things like that to kind of prioritize where you pay and where you pay extra, for example, or where you invest in a home or something. But yet you're still paying down other debts. And so I just find that super interesting. And I think especially for young people and, folks kind of just getting their start, this, I think, transitions well into kind of our next just basic topic of kind of goal setting. Like, how do you do all that? And how do you kind of think ahead? Mandi, what do you think about how to goal set or plan ahead to make it a little easier?
Sure. So the first thing I would say, a lot of people think of goals as like very far off in the distance. Retirement planning, what is retiring, when is retiring, but goals can be short-term, middle-term, long-term. Short-term, do I have an emergency fund that I can use to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses?
Okay.
If I don't, that's probably one of my number one goals, because life happens and sometimes you need to be able to go to that pool. Midterm expenses, it could be, or goals, it could be maybe a house purchase. This is anything that falls middle of life. Probably I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, it could be, hey, I know I'm going to need a new car in 10 years. So what's that going to look like? If it's a house, figuring out if there's going to be a down payment and what you need for that. And then longer term, and always keeping in mind that this is something to focus on. And I think maybe the pandemic has helped us a little bit with that, of thinking outside of what's going to happen over the next year and really try to focus on, okay, this is going to be better, thinking further ahead. What is retirement? When? Where am I located for that? So thinking of goals as a very wide range of a time frame.
Good. I like that. Do you, Deanne, agree in that the emergency fund, kind of 3 to 6 months of savings, is that your target? Do you like a different kind of target? Especially for young people just getting started, if you don't have an emergency fund, what should that look like?
Yeah, I'm 100% agreement with Mandi on that piece. Okay. 3 to 6 months of expenses is for sure necessary.
Perfect. That's a good kind of reminder. And it can go for any age group, of course, but I think we've seen it right over the last year and in the pandemic is you don't know where you might need some extra cash from, and what your situation may be with your employment or, some other things that just totally blindsided us in a lot of ways that you really do need to think thoughtfully about that emergency fund. Do you find, and this can be for either of you or both, that your perspective on, or your client's thought process in the last year has changed in that sense? Are you seeing more urgency for people to come in and that haven't been planning and that want to start planning, people that are thinking differently on those plans than they had in past years now that things have, right, they were home and things kind of slowed down? What's been the kind of reaction to COVID in regards to what clients are really focused on?
Well, I'll jump in and take that one to start. But the clients that I've worked with over the last 12 months have kind of shifted from the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it model.
Okay.
Because we came off of the last decade of one of the greatest bull runs of US history, if not the greatest bull runs of US stock market history. And clients were very content with what was going on. And a lot of times they didn't bother to take time to look for blind spots in their planning. 2020, specifically March of last year, March into April, really kind of heightened the awareness of, hey, maybe we should get a double opinion or a second opinion on what we've got going on. And I don't know, Mandy, you can speak for your firm, but we've been as busy as ever in the last 12 months because of those second opinions.
Yep, I would agree with that. Couple themes quick that I've seen is I've actually, with people not going out as much, not spending enough money. So last year there were some actual tax advantages to that, as people have been working into retirement. But yeah, I think just really a reset in what's important too. I've got some people who have started making changes at their house because they know that they're going to be working from home at least part-time.
Yeah, good point. There's some ways, those are some good investments to make too, right? Increasing the value of your home, especially with the change in the work environment. And if you're not commuting, do you need a new car right away or can that hold off? I mean, it makes a very interesting perspective given the last year that we've had. To shift gears a little bit and talk, and Mandy, you hinted at this a little bit and kind of thinking about goal setting of, right, what do you do kind of when you first get your start post-college and new in your career? What do you do as you move through your 30s, 40s, and as your kids grow, and then as you get closer to retirement? So I wanted to focus a little bit on, how people need to adjust what they're thinking about over time. We've sort of worked our way through several of these, but I think if we start with where do college students specifically and recent grads really need to start when they're thinking about careers, and how can they make sure that their financial well-being is going to be strengthened by the career options that they pick?
Sure. So is this one me?
No, this is sorry. I thought Dan was going to chime in there.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in and take that one. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on toes there.
All good.
Yeah, so when I counsel young clients who are just getting into their early careers, the first thing I have them really think through is the difference between total compensation versus just straight up salary or pay. Because at the end of the day, it's really what puts you in the best position for success, not just a position for success. And fortunately for us, a lot of employers now, when they add in the value, the financial worth of things like health insurance plans, vision, dental, life insurance, disability policies, and they add in the financial value to you because they are providing those benefits to you, that can be a wildly different number than just the salary that they provide. And I see, and quite candidly, if I'm being totally vulnerable, when I picked my first career out of college, I got very attracted to the salary. And I wasn't disciplined enough to look at the full benefits package. And over time, you start to realize that becomes important. So thinking with foresight on those benefits is really, really important, specifically as we think about potentially getting married in the next few years or buying a house or starting a family. Those benefits really do become a big deal. Then to put a cherry on top, then we got retirement benefits as well. And Mandy showed that JP Morgan piece, the value of starting early. And one of the most simple things to think through from a long-term planning standpoint is the value of a company, for example, that offers a 401k that matches a percentage of what you're putting in each year. So for example, if I work with an employer that says, hey, if you put in 5% of your income, we're going to match 4%, automatically that's free money that we shouldn't be
you don't miss it, right? Because you never saw it in the first place. I feel like that's such the best part. Like you didn't see it in the first place. So you're not missing, you don't feel like you're missing it.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with free money. It's almost like the government giving us stimulus checks nonstop for the last 12 months.
Very
Can't
similar,
turn those
right?
down.
And maybe we should talk, but let's stop there. So what are some good ways that people can be smart with those stimulus checks, right? So I'm guessing you would say things like, if you don't have an emergency fund, start one, put it in there as extra cash. What else are good ways to kind of make sure you're feeling healthy financially with those stimulus checks? Don't blow it at the casino. What do you do with it? Or what should you do with it?
Mandi, what do you think?
I would say if you have incurred some credit card debt or had something build up, due to either a furlough or losing the job position that you're in, put it towards some debt. You do still have time right now to contribute to a Roth IRA for last year. You could put it in there. I've seen some people say, hey, these are funds I wasn't planning on having. I could start saving for college for my kids with these. The kids are 3, let's save it now and let it grow.
Again, free money. Yeah. What about you, Dan? Anything else to add?
Money can't buy everything, but it can buy me a boat. Is that the song? No, I mean, it allows you a lot of flexibility, excuse me. And it really is truly individualistic on what advice I would give. I do agree with Mandi on a very, very broad generalization. Many of the clients that I work with have a firm belief that because of all the stimulus money, that taxes are only going up over the next handful of years. And because of that, being strategic and funding after tax plans like a Roth IRA with that money is a really good way to think with foresight.
Good.
Because that Roth obviously is going to be tax-free in the future versus taxable.
Perfect. Great reminders. That's awesome. How about, and I think Mandi, you had talked about this a little bit already in watching for mortgage rates, but how do you decide, or when you're thinking about moving from, owning or renting to owning, kind of where do you need to be in that financial situation?
Sure. So I guess one of the first things to keep in mind is how long are you going to be in your location? If you're only planning on being there for a year or two, an apartment might make more sense. If you want to do an apartment and you want to go that route, make sure a lot of times you'll see, like, if you're downtown in a city, maybe you're closer to work, and you don't have to drive, but the rent's higher, or you could live a little further out, but then you might have to commute every day and pay for parking. Couple things to keep in mind with renting. Also, is there a security deposit or whatnot? And then as far as comparing, do I rent or own? Owning usually is a little more focused on the future. You'll likely need to have a down payment saved up, usually at least 5 to 10% of the purchase price. And then figuring out budget-wise, it's not just can I make the mortgage payment every month, it's can I make sure that I also can pay for property taxes every year? Do I have a lawnmower to mow the lawn? Do I have salt to salt the driveway when it snows? The emergency fund you'd want to be able to cover when your washer or dryer breaks down and you need to buy new ones. So probably requires a little more of an emergency fund. But I have seen recently where, surprisingly, especially now with the lower rates, that home ownership every month, the amount that you're spending can be equal, if not actually cost less than some renting.
Right. So really evaluate your options and kind of what makes sense for you. Obviously, where you live in the country makes a difference, kind of what options are there. But again, the mortgage rates are what you kind of want to keep an eye on too, and how you're going to carry that debt of owning a home and really having the cash up front that you need for the down payment, some of those incidental kind of expenses and things like that. Dan, anything to add on the kind of homeowner front as people move from, college into their career and then they want to purchase a home,
Yeah, for sure. So
I suppose?
yeah, two things that I would be thinking through quickly. Number one, we have seen mortgage interest rates creep back up real slightly compared to 6 months ago, but we have to put it in context of historical averages. So don't be alarmed by the fact that a 30-year mortgage is 0.25% higher than it was 6 months ago. It's still extremely cheap in the grand scheme of things. The one big caveat that I want to add on home ownership is when you add in the total cost of living, so the mortgage, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, we want to keep that number at 30% of your take-home pay or lower. As many times you hear the expression, you become house poor because your housing expenses eat up so much of your budget that you really can't do all the other things necessary to become financially independent. Now, mortgage lenders who happen to be paid on commissions, no shot at mortgage lenders out there, because I'm in the process of moving as we speak, and I'm pre-qualified to spend up to 45% of my take-home pay on a house. That's insane. And so just be leery on that because they're going to want to upsell you. Same with your realtor, but 30% or lower, and you'll be healthy.
And if you already hold a mortgage, when should you consider refinancing? How much does the rate have to be lower than your current rate before you're like, this is worth? Does it really depend on the overall value or how much you owe, or kind of what's your recommendation?
So there are a lot of calculators out there online that you can use to kind of figure out, can I afford this? I think a lot of it more ties to the payment, the savings, the monthly savings. And Dan, feel free to chime in if you feel differently. But it's more of a budget line item, I think, in my eyes, than anything else. That's really what I would focus on.
And it's so case specific too, because sometimes you're paying points, sometimes you're not paying points, sometimes there's closing costs, other times there's not closing costs. So you have to really weigh in all of those.
Perfect. That's good. I think that's even a great message. Just weigh all the options. Don't just look at the percentage, the rate. There's other factors, of course. And every situation is obviously very different, again, as well. All right. What about when, you're through your career, you started your career, you're a young professional, you're owning or renting as it makes sense, and you're going to start a family. What are the kind of key things for financial well-being do you think about at that point in time? Or should you be thinking about?
Yeah, so the way I look at it with young families is some basic estate planning first and foremost, right out of the gate. So we're talking about things like a basic will. Make sure your assets transfer properly if heaven forbid something were to happen to either one of the spouses. And then getting into legal documents like powers of attorney or healthcare directives, guardianship statements, who takes care of your children if something were to happen to you. Very, very important. It's probably one of the easiest things to slip under the rug and forget about. I don't know about you guys. I didn't wake up this morning thinking about my death. It's not exactly number one on my priority list.
No, but I think, that's one thing I was thinking. Who's going to take care of your children and who's going to have control of your assets, right? That's like, once you start thinking about it, it can be very scary and overwhelming. So you've got to do some of those basics kind of in advance, right? Of really thinking, because life does happen and then you get busy and kind of forget.
For sure. And I tell clients all the time, you can either plan proactively or reactively. And proactively means we think with foresight. We help you see some of the landmines before you step on them. Reactively is you step on the landmine, you get hurt, and then we have to scramble. And we can make either situation work. It's just one works way more efficiently.
Right. Yeah. What about college savings? So in Wisconsin, we have the 529 plan. Is there something similar that Minnesota utilizes, or what kind of recommendations for, folks, even their kids are little or as they're older, kind of where do you navigate college savings?
Yeah, you're right. Wisconsin does have specific state plans, which is kind of nice because of tax advantages associated with those plans. In the state of Minnesota, we are kind of the wild, wild west, and we just allow us to invest in whatever 529 plan that exists. And as long as you're investing one, we offer a tax credit for parents or grandparents who save into them. I will say this on the education plan, and Mandi, if you have a different opinion, feel free to share. But I think about planning in general and planning for our kids specifically, like getting onto an airplane and before they take off, not that anybody ever listens to the safety announcements, but assuming you did, you would hear them say, in the event of low cabin pressure, put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others. The parent in us says, hey, no way,
No.
I'm going to help my kids first, despite my own safety. And that happens a lot in financial planning. I live in a community where most of my network sends their kids to a private school, K through 12, and they ultimately end up going to private colleges. And a lot of the clients I work with in their 50s and 60s are broke, absolutely financially demolished because they funded their kids all the way through. And while that's admirable, that's a really tough situation to unwind. So just be careful and be strategic, because we all went to Ripon, right? We've probably experienced high cost of tuition, and magically we've all survived up to this point. So just be careful.
Yeah, I do like that reminder. It's a good reminder, right? If you don't have your own emergency fund and you haven't paid down those debts, you shouldn't be saving for your children, because you need to watch out for your own income as well. Because if something does happen to you, that's all just going to transfer to them. It's really hard to kind of, it's nice to want to save for your kids, but it's hard to do that if you have to, all these other expenses that really should be your first priority.
Yeah, for sure.
Mandi, what did you have anything to add about the college specific piece or things, especially related to being in Wisconsin?
So Wisconsin has two state specific plans. One is with EdVest, and one is called Tomorrow's Scholar, and that's through Voya Investments. You can contribute quite a bit to them. You get a tax credit on your state of Wisconsin returns. It's a little over $3,000 of the contribution right now you can deduct from your income. You can open one for anybody you're related to. If one kid doesn't use it, the other one can. So you can change the beneficiary on it too. I think some of that feeds back into maybe just start one, pay yourself first. And if you want to try to help the kids a little bit with college, as long as you paid yourself first, start there.
Perfect. I like that. And then Mandi, let's talk a little bit about kind of that last piece of, and we talked about a little bit with the Roth IRA, but okay, you're kind of right, your kids are grown, you're an empty nester, you're moving on, right? You really start honing in more on retirement, even if you've been saving that whole time. So you want to talk a little bit about long-term planning? I can pull up those handout you had. I'll start with this one. All I know about it is it's got pretty colors. You're on mute, Mandi.
All right, that's better.
There we go.
So this speaks to, as you're saving, where do you put the money? We talked about what happens if you leave it in a savings account at 1%. This really shows us, it's a color coding by kind of asset class of which asset class performs the best each year. So as you can see, for example, orange is small cap. That's an easy one to pick out. Sometimes that performs the best. Sometimes it's right near the bottom. Really, the message here is to diversify your investments across different asset classes. Lately, if you've been, buying the S&P 500 over the last couple of years, that's that large cap, the green, that will have done pretty well for you. But looking back and looking forward, that's not always going to be the case. So make sure you're really doing an asset allocation model. As you get toward retirement, you'll probably want to make it a little bit more conservative so that you can keep what you've made, but you are still going to want to at least get a little bit return there. So yeah, asset diversification, definitely. Outside of that, where are you saved? Okay, this one is, how much should you have saved at different ages? Okay. So this has those same income thresholds. So we can look at like the $50,000 number here. So this says at age 25, you should have about 0.6 times your current income saved for retirement. Okay. So then working down, maybe when you're 50, you want 3.3 times your income saved that you would put toward retirement. As your household income increases over time, if you want to scroll down to that next slide, one thing that we see is people who have higher incomes during their lifetimes, Social Security makes up a smaller percentage of their retirement income. So your income replacement in retirement, more of it is going to have to come from your savings, the more income that you have. I do also like to remind people to be mindful that Social Security is not the healthiest fund right now. I don't think that it will go away completely, but I don't know that that the benefit amounts will be maintained at 100% of what your current Social Security statement says. So it's a nice thing to fall back on. It would be nice if it lasts forever. There are a lot more of economic models and forecasting that goes into it, but don't depend just on Social Security for your income in retirement.
Perfect. Good reminder. As we kind of are wrapping up our time together, I had one kind of bigger question in the sense of just, how things have been going and thinking about the pandemic. And is there something that you, or, two little things or something that you feel like has really changed during the pandemic in regards to kind of the financial wellness and the state of financial wellness that you don't see going back to the old way? So something that had to be changed because of COVID, and now you feel like that's going to kind of last beyond the pandemic?
Mandi, I've got a couple ideas, but
I think remote work is going to be more common for sure. I think we were headed that way anyways, and I think this was just more of a catalyst. I think a lot of online retail is going to continue as well. Order your groceries for pickup. I think that'll probably continue in some sense. I think overall spending habits, we saw a lot more savings during the pandemic and cutting down on debt. I think people are, like I said earlier, going to be a little more focused on the long term than all right, do I get to go out to eat next month because I'm allowed to by regulations, or it's not that I don't have the money. It's like, all right, well, what makes sense here health wise?
Sure. Yeah, and you think that people spending less and saving more and paying down more will continue as an outcome of this pandemic that maybe we weren't seeing ahead of the pandemic?
I think it'll pick up here some as vaccines get distributed and people leave their house more. I think we could see a blip where people are spending a lot for a time just because they finally can. But I think overall it's really helped reset some mindsets on, all right, well, it wasn't that bad saving a little bit more. I made it through, so
yeah,
I can keep doing that.
Yeah, nice. Dan, what was kind of on your mind with?
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts on that. Number one, I do tend to agree that we're going to be a little bit more budget conscious moving forward. I think 10 years of bliss coming out of the financial crisis from 08, 09 got some of us a little bit lax with our planning. And we realized real quickly that our jobs aren't always as secure as we think they might be. So being a little bit more budget focused and not stretching ourselves too thin financially, I think will linger on into the future, which is healthy. I also think from a long-term standpoint, from a investment and just savings in general standpoint, a give or take 30% correction in March reminded a lot of people that if you've got short-term goals with your money, investments may not be the best place for short-term goals. And even as clients transition into retirement in the future, the reminder that even if you're 65 or 70 and you need income in the next 2 years, pulling income off of your investments in that short time frame may not be the wisest decision. Whereas cash, CDs, other short-term assets for short-term goals, probably going to put you in a better spot.
Right, you might need cash quickly that you didn't anticipate that you needed, and that definitely came to light during COVID. And very interesting. Well, wonderful. I think we're just about wrapped up on our time, but if there's any final thoughts on kind of just how do how can we, as a community and especially young people and recent grads, and as we continue through our, post-Ripon experience, be thinking about kind of our financial well-being. Where do you start and how do you move forward, especially kind of during this pandemic situation and then coming out of it? Any final thoughts from either of you?
For me, it's start with your goal setting, get very, very clear on what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it, and then work on the budgeting from there. And once you have the budgeting and the cash flow down, then you can achieve almost anything.
I would add, if you're not sure what you want to do, just start somewhere. Plans change, life changes, stuff like COVID happens. Part of the planning process is making changes when you need to. Very few people start at age 25 with a full plan of exactly when they're going to retire and exactly how much money they're going to have. Life changes will happen, but start doing something.
Yeah, I liked your point, Dan. I think it's a good one to leave on is, a plan is better than no plan, right? Any plan is better than no plan. And I like that. It's kind of a great, just simple reminder. And that goes for obviously a lot of things beyond financial well-being, but in this case, it really does fit in nicely. With that, we'll end our first installment of the Our Connection series. We will be back on April 6th for a physical well-being discussion from a yoga perspective. And so we'll take a little bit of a different angle on coming out of the pandemic in a positive physical well-being way and how we are surviving, especially work at home. So again, thank you all so much for being here. And again, we'll follow up afterwards with some of these handouts and things like that.